Hi, this is Matt with State of Flex, here to give you my spoiler review of Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Back a couple days ago when I reviewed this, I did a completely non-spoiler review, so if you're looking for a non-spoiler review, click onto my channel, find the non-spoiler one from a couple days prior. As of now, we are going to deep dive into the spoilers, because a lot of what I have to say with this film involves a spoiler, for the plot of the film itself is in fact a spoiler. Most of the trailers concealed the fact that Scarlet Witch is the villain of this film. And that is where I find that a lot of the polarizing response to the movie is. And as I was watching it, that was something that concerned me as well. So after the death of Black Widow was always my favorite Avenger. And then, like, Thor, of the original six, it was Black Widow and Thor were my favorites. But with the introduction of Age of Ultron, I really started to gravitate towards Scarlet Witch, and I really liked her in the comics, and I liked what they were doing with her in these movies. And by the time we got to Infinity War, Scarlet Witch was my second favorite Avenger. So as I was watching this film unfold and she became straight up villainous, I had to reconcile with that in my brain. And as I was watching, it really kind of occurred to me that she's never really not been the villain. She was introduced in Age of Ultron, or really Captain America, the Winter Soldier, with a straight-up villainous sting, showcasing her power. In Age of Ultron, we got to see her disassemble the entire Avengers before she gets a pep talk from Hawkeye and joins them. But then the very next time we see her, the very first thing she does is slaughter 12 Wakandans. And she is played up as like the sort of catalyst, one of the catalysts that gets the Avengers to separate yet again, and the media sort of latches onto her as the villain. And we get to spend some time with her and really understand her and see that even though she's done some not great things, she isn't necessarily all that bad. And then we get to see everything she did in Infinity War and Endgame, almost taking down Thanos on her own. And then she gets WandaVision, which is my favorite thing that Marvel has ever done that is not an Avenger film. I think that movie, or that TV show, is stunningly perfect. Even in that, she is doing some hardcore villainous things. So for her to take a completely straight-on villainous turn in this film makes sense narratively. You can get there, but it was something that I really had to warm up to. And I was like, okay, so this is going to be how the Marvel formula goes. This is going to be her redemption, and she's going to act as a bad guy for a while until she learns her lesson and isn't by the end of the film. And yes, to a certain extent, that is what we got. But watching her take a turn where she's killing people blithely, and here I'm talking about like the faceless soldiers, that was one thing. I was like, okay, she's killing people, but it's not anybody that we're tethered to. We can come back from this on a narrative standpoint, and I still wasn't comfortable, but I understood it. It was when she takes we get introduced to the Illuminati, and she takes them out. And that's where I was like, as I was watching, I was like, there's really no coming back from this. She is going to have to die by the end of it. I just don't see her surviving this film. and so I had the remaining 40 minutes of screen time to accept the narrative conclusion. What Sam Raimi brings to it is the same thing he brought to the Spider-Man movies he made. As great of an interesting character as Vulture is, and Mysterio to a lesser extent, you never understood the full weight of humanity inside the villains from those original Spider-Man movies. Nobody else has really come close. There is a humanity at the core of Green Goblin that a film like No Way Home really capitalized on. But there's a reason why Dr. Octopus in Spider-Man 2 really works. He's doing villainous things, but you understand him because at his core there's that thing that tethers him to humanity, where you can really like hone in, and it reveals everything about his character that he is so motivated to accomplish his desires. Sam Raimi taps into that with Scarlet Witch in a way that the MCU has largely not done with a character that he hasn't had a hand in. I think they did, as I said, really well with Spider-Man No Way Home and Green Goblin, and really all the villains that they introduced or reintroduced in that film. But Marvel movies are always kind of burdened with their villains not being too great, and even the ones that are great, like Thanos, is great because he's a physical threat and an ideological threat. Same thing with Killmonger is probably the other great example, but he's an ideological threat and is essentially right in that whole film. He just goes about it the wrong way, but there's not that tether of humanity. The only other character in the MCU that really has that is Loki, and it took several turns to kind of get that right to the point where he's no longer a villain. Sam Raimi tapping into what makes Wanda so unbelievably human and understandable is what completely sells her narrative thread in this film that is picked up from every previous one. She has lost everybody in her life, so much so that she wants to dissolve into this fictional utopia of her own creation that's in another world. She would rather live there with her 2 kids, the last pieces of that she has of Vision, even if she created them or manufactured them in WandaVision. That whole universe is where she would rather spend her time. So it also kind of makes sense that she doesn't care about what she's doing in the 616 universe because she doesn't plan to live there anymore. She treats people a little more softly if she personally knows them. Your Doctor Stranges, your Wongs, but she still is like fueled by this conviction of living in another world, and you as a viewer can completely understand it, and you're pleading with her not to do it, to kill people, but you're also like almost rooting for her because after everything she's gone through, she deserves having that happiness that she can't attain. And I think that is very powerful, and I think that's what Sam Raimi brought to the table beyond visuals. He understands the necessity to have a great villain, be somebody that's understandable, and also very human. He also understands that a hero has to make tough choices, and the whole fact that this film is predicated on the fact that Stephen Strange made a choice by simply doing the one to Tony Stark, and the ramifications of that, and the parallels between Strange and Wanda in achieving their goals is not lost on me, and I think that's explored very well here. The film loses track of Strange's tether a little bit, but it's okay because I think the film ultimately really succeeded with Wanda. And Strange gets that opportunity to look beyond the self, the needs of the many, if you will, in allowance to allow America Chavez to rise in her own right. And he gives her the chance that I think he essentially sacrificed Tony with, or on. So yeah, that's kind of where I was coming at. And these are like very bold character choices, or narrative choices, that if you don't respond well to that, like I said in my original review, you're not going to like this. And there's a pretty loud section of the internet that is really kind of trashing on this. There's also like superfluous one, like people trashing on it because they don't like gay content or what have you. And like the political stance that this movie takes is like, if you're having a problem with that, then you need to recognize that you are on the wrong side of history at this point. The movie does have a couple of like political statements that are a little more intriguing, that are touched on but not really deep dove into. Like I think the idea of having this white suburban girl who, or woman who's trying to protect her homestead from the invading Latinx character who is threatening to destroy her suburban utopia is kind of an interesting story thread that like it's definitely there and it's easy to read into, and says stuff about us societally, but it's there, you can acknowledge it, but it doesn't really like hone in on it. Yet the way people are like bashing this film for the gay content, which I think is oddly enough a little more subtle than the plot thread that I mentioned, is kind of interesting. What else do I want to say about this film? The other area of caution that I would urge, that's something that I noticed as being potentially problematic, and I alluded to this in my review, is the fact that it kind of goes back to a criticism I had with Iron Man 2 and with Age of Ultron. But this film is the most egregious one, and for those other two movies I think it did the movie itself a disservice. For this one, I don't think the movie suffers from this problem, but this is something the studio is going to have to pretty much come to terms with moving forward. And we're going to see how the box office picks up week 2. If this is going to have legs or if it's going to have a sharp drop. We might see a sharp drop because of what I'm going to discuss. But something that I think the common criticism of Iron Man 2 is that the film just seemed to be a trailer package for the Avengers. And then Age of Ultron seemed like a trailer package for concepts that we're going to see explored in Phase 3 of the Marvel Universe. This kind of is the opposite of that coin. Rather than being a trailer package for something coming off in the future, this is a, like, investment to get to. This one requires so much previous viewing that I think the film, if you are invested and you've already watched and you know everything you need to know from Age of Ultron, from Civil War, from Doctor Strange, from Infinity War, Endgame, WandaVision, what have you, you're set and you're gonna gain maximum enjoyment from this movie, as well as get enjoyment from the fact that you get teases at future films with potential for Fantastic Four goodness. I'm going to touch on the Illuminati in a minute, as well as like layering in Black Bolt from the Inhumans TV show and the Professor X side of things from the X-Men universe. Like, there's a lot of reward if you've invested all that time. However, it's not lost on me that this is all a Marvel movie. Marvel's big head honcho for the longest time and the most identifiable man involved with the Marvel Comics is undoubtedly Stan Lee. And Stan Lee had a quote when it came to comics that I think is really relevant towards the filmmaking side of things and something that they've lost sight of. And that is that his philosophy to all of the writers who ever worked on a Marvel comic was that every single comic is somebody's first comic. So write the story. You can tell like a chronological story or something that has like a long threaded narrative, but tell that story in a fashion that if somebody has picked up a comic and it's their very first one, they'd be able to understand what's going on. And the fact that Stan Lee had the philosophy of every comic somebody's first comic, so write it as if it is so, has not translated to the films. And I think that's something that is unique in the past couple of years. You can watch, let's focus on the Captain Americas. Captain America is a good example. You can watch the first Captain America. It has a beginning, middle, and end, and it has story threads that could go forward. You can watch Winter Soldier. It has a beginning, middle, and end. It had, you know, it had stuff that has come before, and you know that it has potential to launch stories later, but it is its own movie with its own statement. And you can look at the same thing with Civil War. Beginning, middle, and end, a future that's forthcoming, but it understands that its narrative is completely concluded in this without having... You don't have to have seen Age of Ultron to understand firmly the scenario set up within Civil War. You don't have to watch any of the Avenger movies, or even really the Captain America movies before it, to get what's going on. Whereas I think this film's requirement of having all those other media, or some familiarity on some level with them, including the TV show of WandaVision, is entering dangerous territories. I even think that Infinity War, like certainly you would appreciate Infinity War if you've watched the Guardians and if you've watched the other Avengers and maybe the one-off movies, but the way that's written of heist movie, guy needs to collect these things, good guys need to stop guy from collecting things, is a narrative function that makes sense. And the way that movie ends is exactly what the main character, who is Thanos, sets out to do. He wants to sit down and watch a golden sunset rise on a beautiful future. And that is exactly what he accomplishes by the end of the movie. There doesn't need to be a sequel to that. It would be a dark, sinister movie to end on, but there really didn't need to be a sequel. It has a beginning, middle, and end, even if you're dropped in medias res. This movie also drops you in medias res, but you can't help but feel like you need to understand what's going on from What If, or WandaVision, or the Avengers and stuff. And it seems so disconnected from the first Doctor Strange. Like, it's kind of weird in that way. Like, I can't think of another sequel in the Marvel Universe that is so disjointed from the previous installment. It's kind of unusual, right? So my urge of caution is for the Marvel movies going forward is like, yeah, you can tether these things in, and there are ways you can make references and stuff to previous events, but you can also tell the story as if you didn't need to rely on what came before. This is going to be an exercise, if they carry on the way they are, in futility, because at a certain point you're not going to be growing your audience anymore. You're just going to be trying to maintain the audience you have, and your numbers are going to start to dwindle. And I'm curious if we're going to see that reflected in the second week of this, where more people have not seen all those products before than have. The Marvel diehards who came out this weekend to see it are like invested. I don't know if they're going to see it a second time. I certainly will. I want to. It's that good. But for any newcomer or whatever, or people who are just the casual movie goers, are like, oh, I like the first Doctor Strange, I'll see the second one, I've never seen any of these other things in between. I don't know if they're going to really be on board with it. The one thing it has going for it is the cool factor. It looks great, and it has a strong narrative with its hero and villain and stuff. Last thing I want to talk about is something that a lot of people are hitting at negatively, which is the use of the Illuminati. A common criticism I've seen is, why include all these people if you're just going to blithely kill them? Marvel keeps doing this. They keep promising us somebody like Quicksilver from the X-Men movies being in WandaVision, and then it turns out he's just Harry Boner or whatever his name was. And it was just an excuse to get a boner joke. And it's just, it's a major cameo that leads to no payoff. There is a nugget of truth to that for this movie, but I think what the narrative function of the Illuminati does in this movie is it allows you to see that Wanda has gone to the point of no return. In killing those 5 characters of the Illuminati herself, in doing away with the Peggy Carter character, that's somebody that within the Marvel Universe we have had an emotional connection to. At least on some level. I know I have. She's one of my favorite side characters. Her death means something because she meant so much to Captain America or any number of things, or maybe just to you as a viewer. The death of Black Bolt ties in the TV shows. If you're a fan exclusively of the TV shows, and not necessarily of any of the other superfluous material, but you've invested enough time as to watch those TV shows, his death means something to you. Likewise, internet fan casting for the past 5 years has been screaming for John Krasinski to be Mr. Fantastic. So when we actually get John Krasinski as Mr. Fantastic, which was one of the most jaw-dropping moments for me as the viewer, because I had no idea it was coming, that blew my mind. And to have Wanda kill our fan cast is jaw-dropping. Having her kill Captain Marvel, the new Captain Marvel, or Rambeau, if you do that, you're taking away who we have been told consistently by Marvel is the most powerful of the MCU characters, Captain Marvel. And then Wanda killing Professor X, the first X-Men to officially appear in the MCU, and the longest running and most common, if you're not including Wolverine, favorite character of the X-Men by most people would be Professor X. And you know, he's also ludicrously powerful, so for her to kill him, you know that's the point of no return. Their death is not superfluous. Their death is an acknowledgement to the audience that she has hit a point of no return that affects you emotionally on some level. Whether you're a fan of any of these number of avenues, it means something. And I think that is the strength of it. It's also pretty subversive. You expect that they're going to introduce somebody like John Krasinski, that they're going to really build on top of that, and you're going to see something wild and crazy, and oh my god, I'm so excited for Fantastic Four, but nope, he is shredded to ribbons, and that is completely shocking. That's something that I noted in my review was this movie has a couple Last Jedi moments. I think that whole scene is probably one of them. And seeing criticism on the internet, it sounds like it. The last thing I wanted to talk about that was sort of spoilery, and I didn't get a chance to in my original review, was I am all in on Doctor Strange as a zombie with his Cape of Souls. That was the coolest goddamn thing I have ever seen. I was geeking out. He went full Sam Raimi. That was just such a great, iconic visual. The fact that you have these two mystical people going at each other is great, and my single favorite thing in the world is them having the wizards musician battle where they're like shooting notes at each other, and then you get like classic symphonic music like done in musical notes that are hurling at each other, and then a harp comes in and like saves the day. That was great. That was epic. It's wonderful. Bruce Campbell's in this movie as well. Bruce Campbell's amazing, and I like that we get more of Bruce Campbell beating the crap out of himself, which he did so good in the Evil Dead movies, and that could not have made me happier. And I love that the movie ends with him screaming into the camera, "It's over!" It was great. And yeah, so my review is now over too. I hope you liked this movie. Let me know what you thought in the comments down below. You can get as spoilery as you want. I'm sure excited for watching this movie yet again. Thanks for watching, and let me know your favorite scene in the comments down below. Peace.